Alrighty, now that we have our playlist items being populated, let's go ahead and write some CSS. Before we do that, let's go ahead and inspect our element, and I'll move this off to the side, and let's talk about the structure of our elements a little bit. So each item has an li. Inside of that we have our inner, and then inside of that we have our thumb wrapper, which has our thumbnail in it, and then we have our details, which has a title and a time, and then we have our progress span, which will be our nice little progress bar. So let's move this guy off to the side, and then open up our CSS. So we can move this, we can try to get them both visible at the same time, so we can use our awesome hot reloading. And let's open up the playlist, and we can open up the playlist.sdss. Now, if you're interested in doing this, you could also separate out the different playlist components to have their own style sheet file if you wanted to. But in this particular application, I'm going to be putting all playlist-related styles into this one Sass file. But again, you're not limited to do that if you don't like that style. You could have a list.scss and a toolbar.scss and all that stuff. But let's get started. First thing I'm going to do is going to import backpack styles variables. Remember, our variables are our colors that we have in that right there. So we want access to our colors. And then I'm gonna do section.playlist first. So for the section playlist, I'm going to do display flex like usual, and I'm going to go ahead and give it a flex direction of column, and then I'm going to give it a position of relative. So this isn't going to make anything immediately different, but it will come into play once we build our toolbar. Then, let's see here. How do I want to do this? I think I'll worry about the header a little bit later when we write our Chrome component. But I do have to open up the or start styling the Chrome component, because if we look at it, we see that the playlist starts on section playlist. Then we get to our Chrome. Then we have our scroll area, right? So we do have to style the Chrome a little bit. And I'm simply going to say overflow hidden to make Firefox happy. Flex grow of 1, display flex, and position relative. No, not position red. That doesn't even make any sense. Position relative. And then inside of that, I'm going to do a money or a forward slash or a greater than, sorry, to do it immediate descendant. And I'm going to do scroll area is going to have a position of relative, a flex grow of 1, a display of flex, a flex direction of column, and an overflow y of scroll. So go ahead and save that out. And I misspelled overflow again. I don't know how I managed to do that. But anyway, with those styles, you now see that we do indeed have a scroll bar in our scroll area, which is why it's called scroll area, because it hosts the scroll bar. I mean, I thought that name was pretty good. Anyway, so now let's go ahead and jump down to our playlist items. Our playlist items section, I'm going to delineate this with this, and we'll do playlist items. And there's going to be a handful of stuff in this that we're going to need to style, but we're only going to worry about the basics right now. So, like, there's going to be stuff about sorting and selected items and all that fun stuff. But we can do that later. So I'm going to say section.playlist, section.playlist.playlist list, which is going to be that UL that you see right there. That's what we're selecting. And then inside of that, we're going to just do our standard margin and padding of 0, as well as our list style of none. So save that out, and now we have no special styling for our list. We'll give it a flex grow of 1 to make sure it fills up the entire area, and we'll give it a min height of 100%, so that it always will always be at least 100% height. Then we'll style the individual LIs. Now for this, I guess I can throw this in right now. Let's just do something fun. I'm going to add a transition of background 250 milliseconds linear, L-I-N-E-A-R. Come on. And comma, color 250 linear. A lot of these will be 250. 250 linear. Box shadow is going to be 100 milliseconds linear. And then our transform is just going to be 500 milliseconds. So I messed that up a little bit. There we go. So I'm wanting to throw in some basic CSS transitions here for things that we'll be doing in the future. But I don't like doing transition all, because there's a lot of styles that we don't want to have CSS interpolate. So as a result, I'm just transitioning on the specific things that I'm wanting to maybe transition to in the future. Each LI will have a padding of 0, a cursor of default. Now, the cursor of default is going to come in a little bit later, but right now at the very least it'll make it so it looks more like an application, where when I hover over the text it doesn't turn into that little vertical bar. I kind of like that for things that are sort of to the side or ancillary, to make it have a more of an application-y feel. With the text, with the chat, I kind of like having that vertical bar cursor, but with the playlist, I like it to feel more solid. And to make something feel more solid, setting the cursor to default is a really simple thing you can do. And then I'm going to add a display of inline block and a width of 100%. So none of those are actually going to change the display of anything right now, but they will in the future. Then let's go ahead or they'll impact what we're about to do. Let's style our inner. So in our inner, what I'm going to do is grab a margin of 5 pixels, a padding bottom of 5 pixels, a position of relative, and a display of, you guessed it, flex. So now, immediately, we notice that in the inner, everything is being moved off to the side, and that's what we want there. So now inner is right here, and now everything is being, not moved off to the side, but you know what I'm saying. It's being pushed over with the row-oriented flexbox. All right, let's do our thumb wrap. To do our thumb wrap, I'm actually going to write a function. So the function I'm going to write is going to be, I'm going to put it at the top here, down on playlist items. I'm going to write a function. It's going to be mixin, well, it's going to be mixin rather, thumbnail-size width, and we'll see why in a second. This is going to set, first of all, I'm going to do thumb.aspect is 0.75. And then I'm going to say width is going to be the width that was passed in. And the height is going to be the thumb-aspect times width. So we are creating a mixin that allows us to specify a width in pixels. And then it sets up the height to the correct aspect ratio with 0.75. So yeah. Now we can jump down to the thumb wrap, and we can start styling that. So the first thing we're obviously going to want to do is set up our thumbnail size. So I'm going to say include thumbnail-size of 30 pixels. Then I'm going to set the margin right to 10 pixels. That'll push away the details by 10 pixels. I'm going to set his position to relative, and you'll see why I'm setting his position to relative in a moment. And then I'm going to give him a flex grow of 0 and a flex shrink of 0. So he's always going to be the same size. Now that's not going to have any effect yet until we style our image. So let's go ahead and jump in here and style our image component. He is going to have include thumbnail-size of 30 pixels by default. All right. So by default, the image is going to be 30 pixels by whatever that multiplication logic is. And then he's going to have a position of absolute, a top of 0, a left of 0, a border of 2 pixels solid background, our background color, and then an opacity of 0.5 and a display of block. So let's save that out. And it doesn't look like that's having any effect here. So let's try to figure out why our thumb wrap, thumb wrapper. So we do thumb wrapper, not thumb wrap. And we save that out, and immediately you see the difference there. So that's the thumb wrap and the individual items being properly sized. So that's awesome. But we can do better than that. So let's go ahead and style our details. Underneath thumb wrapper, we're going to do .details, and we're going to say align self center, first of all, which won't have an effect just yet, but it will here. Will soon. Overflow of hidden, text overflow of ellipses, a white space of no wrap, and a transition of margin left 250 ms, or just 250 ms. There we go. And by doing that, we see what happened. Basically, we aligned the vertical line of the title to the middle. And then with these 3 properties, we made the overflow turn into ellipses. But remember, we still have that title attribute on all of these, so we can still hover over them to get the full title. And of course, that's due to the title attribute right there. All right, now let's do our time. So inside of details, I'm going to style the time. And for time, we're going to say display is block. We're going to give it a font size of 7 points. And we're going to give it a color of darken color by 20% and a padding top of 4 pixels. So that's going to bring the time underneath all of the titles. And then finally, after details, we're simply going to say .progress and then display none. Because we don't want to deal with our progress bar just yet. But we will here in a while once we actually implement the logic that shows who's playing and what time are we currently at. Now, the last thing I want to do is implement a hover effect, but I'm going to do this kind of in a weird way. I'm going to scroll up to the top here, and I'm going to do this outside of our section playlist list. And for now, I'm just going to repeat that. You might be wondering why I'm doing this, but so section playlist-list greater than li:hover. And so for this, I'm going to open that up, and then I'm going to do forward greater than inner, and then I'm going to say image, and I'm going to say include thumbnail dash size of 60 pixels. So we're going to make the thumbnails twice as big, then a top of -5 pixels, and a left of -5 pixels, an opacity of 1, and a border of none. And then I'm also going to style details and give it a margin left of 20 pixels. So let's make sure this works first. Let's come over here and hover. And it almost works. It seems that the image isn't quite having the size changed. But why did I break this out here? Well, the reason why is we're actually going to make this selector a little bit more interesting in a later video. When we're sorting the playlist, I don't want this hover effect to apply. So in the future, we're going to add a not selector, a not pseudo selector to say, if we're not currently sorting the playlist, then apply this rule, otherwise don't. That's why I broke it out instead of putting it lower. But let's figure out why the image is not being styled properly. So if we hover over this, an interesting way to debug hover issues is to come in here to the inspector and right-click an element and select hover to force it into the hover state. And then we can go in here and we can click on the image and we can kind of get an idea of what's going on here. What seems like what's happening here is the selector that we used previously to style the image has greater precedence than the selector we're using to style the hover state. So let's go ahead and, since we're going to do this already in the future, I'll do it here. I'm going to add an HTML space to that. And by doing the HTML space, I've added weight to the selector and made this selector override the other selector. So now you see that the image does get bigger like that, which is the behavior that I'm looking for. So let's take off that forced hover for a sec. So we will, in the future, add to this selector, but for now we'll just leave it as HTML so we take over the precedence. But anyway, we now have this cool little hover effect. I also want to style the background of the LI. So up here at the top, I'm going to say if we're hovering, then I want to say background is border dash panel, and save that out. And now you see the background also changes, and it also fades in, which is really cool. Nice little effect there. All right, so I think that is the basic styling that I'm going to go for right now. We'll be adding some more styles in later as we add things like moving and all that fun stuff. But I think it's time to wrap up this video and move on to, how about the ability to add videos? I think that would be a very nice next step. So with that, we'll see you guys in the next video.